This video is about why China hates Japan. Check the link below this and you'll see a short video, about 4 minutes long, speaking about it. But basically, what it boils down to is something that happened in December 13, 1937 to January 1938. So it's called the Nanking Massacre. They call it the Rape of Nanking. And basically, during that time, the Japanese soldiers killed anywhere from 50,000 to 300,000 Chinese people. And what it says is the Nanking Massacre was an episode of mass murder and mass rape committed by Japanese troops against the residents of Nanjing, then the capital of the Republic of China, during the Second Sino-Japanese War, so around World War II. The massacre is also known as the Rape of Nanking, the Nanjing Massacre, or Rape of Nanjing. The massacre occurred over a period of 6 weeks starting on December 13, 1937, the day that the Japanese captured Nanjing. During this period, soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army murdered Chinese civilians and disarmed combatants who numbered an estimated 40,000 to over 300,000, and perpetrated widespread rape and looting. Since most Japanese military records on the killings were kept secret or destroyed shortly after the surrender of Japan in 1945, historians have been unable to accurately estimate the death toll of the massacre. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East in Tokyo estimated in 1946 that over 200,000 Chinese were killed in the incident. China's official estimate is more than 300,000 dead, based on the evaluation of the Nanjing War Crimes Tribunal in 1947. The death toll has been actively contested among scholars since the 1980s. The Chinese government has been accused of exaggerating aspects of the massacre, such as the death toll, while historical analysts and Japanese nationalists go as far as claiming that the massacre was fabricated for propaganda purposes. The controversy surrounding the massacre remains a central issue in Japanese relations with other Asian Pacific nations as well. Although the Japanese government has admitted to the killing of a large number of non-combatants, looting and other violence committed by the Imperial Japanese Army after the fall of Nanking, and Japanese veterans who served there have confirmed that a massacre took place, a small but vocal minority within both the Japanese government and society have argued that the death toll was military in nature and that no such crimes ever occurred. Denial of the massacre and revisionist accounts of the killings have become a staple of Japanese nationalism. In Japan, public opinion of the massacre varies, but few deny outright that the conflict occurred. Alright, so there's going to be a lot more information as well. It gets really in detail about what happened, and it's really hard to read. It really is, because it talks about a lot of rape that happened. It talks about how some of the soldiers forced the sons to have sex with their mothers, and then the daughters to have sex with the fathers, and they'll kill them off. It talks about them raping the women and then sticking objects and knives and bayonets up their vaginas. It talks about some really horrible things, and it was really hard to read. And I just wanted to bring awareness to what happened, and it really does understand, it really gets me to understand why the martial arts is the way that it is, and why you see a lot of Chinese martial art movies where they're fighting against the Japanese, and a lot of hate and a lot of tension between the two. And you see a lot of Bruce Lee's movies are like that, fighting the Japanese, and then you see the Yip Man movies where they're fighting against the Japanese. And if you don't know the history and what happened, then you might judge it and say that that they're racist or whatnot or whatever. But it's really based on something that happened that really can't be forgiven, especially when the officials of the country don't want to acknowledge and recognize what happened and truly make things right, but they're trying to deny it and say that it didn't happen or it wasn't as serious as they claim. And it's just, I could understand why there's a lot of uneasiness and tension. And to me, I compare it to the struggles with the African Americans and the Caucasian, the black and white struggle, and oppression. Basically, that boils down to oppression. And African Americans in America have been oppressed from slavery and all that. Um, and that's what happened. The Chinese were being oppressed and they were being slaughtered and murdered and raped and all sorts of horrible things happening. And really, the training in the martial arts is supposed to be designed to really help you overcome this type of oppression, or just arts in general, and all this stuff happened before I was even born, so, but I think it's important to know what happened, just like it's important to know why, what the blacks went through, that they were slaves and how they were treated in the past. It's important to know that, and it's important to know about the Holocaust. It's important to know about what Hitler did to the Jews. It's important to know about history so you could understand why there's tension, racial tensions going on now. And I didn't create race. I didn't create this world. I didn't create division. I didn't create these dividing lines between America and China and Canada and Japan, and all these other countries. I didn't create any of this. I'm just trying to understand it all. Like, I'm watching these Chinese martial art movies and I'm wondering why they hate each other so much, But this brings it all to light. It makes me understand all the stuff that the African Americans went through, and this, Martin Luther King Jr. and having, a national holiday for his birthday. I mean, stuff like this is a reminder of what happened. When you're reminded of what happened in the past, then it could be a helpful indicator to not allow it to happen again. Same thing that what happened with the Holocaust, what happened with World War II, and I think things happen for a reason. There's a law of karma, and I think with the Holocaust, and then with the atom bomb, the Hiroshima, with the America bombing Japan. I think they said that over 225,000 people in Japan died. But with what they did to China, it's almost like, when you put out that type of energy, then it's gonna come back, and I think it just makes it why the Chinese martial arts is more for the Chinese, and why it has to be separated, there's clear differences between the Chinese martial arts and the Japanese martial arts. It's not the same. Just like there's differences between black and white, don't say it's the same. I mean, if you want to say that it's the same, then get rid of all these labels. But we live in a world of labels, and they created these labels for a reason, with these divisions. And if you're going to have these labels, then don't say, that you're practicing the Japanese martial arts when you're practicing the Chinese martial arts. Don't say that you're practicing the Chinese martial arts when you're practicing the Japanese martial arts. And I can understand why some of these Chinese people are highly offended when you say that what they practice is a Japanese when it's not. It's Chinese. And just imagine. I mean, if you can even read through what happened, and just think about how you would feel if that happened to you, to your family or to your people. Like how can there really be forgiveness? You know, and if there is, it doesn't mean that you should forget it. And definitely, it's not right for them to deny it. It's kind of like, you know, denying that slavery ever even occurred. Like, how could you deny that? You know, um, and that's the problem. That I see is where it's not about forgiveness, especially when you got people that try to say that something didn't even happen when it did. So I can understand, and really, the Chinese martial arts is designed for people to protect themselves against being bullied. And they were clearly bullied. So if you're practicing the Chinese martial arts, you're not supposed to be training bullies. You're not supposed to be training the people that are raping and killing you. You're supposed to keep that training for yourself and your people, that are not the ones that are the aggressors. And that's pretty much how it goes. What I mean? Like, you look at the history, what happened. They did this, the Rape of Nanking to China, and then they went ahead and they did the attacking Pearl Harbor. This is something that their country is responsible for. And not saying that it's not that all people of that country are bad, but their country did these acts, and it has an impact on their image, and it can't be forgotten. This is a part of history. This stuff did happen, so this needs to be acknowledged, and it needs to be acknowledged in order to move forward and grow and learn and try to achieve peace. When I look at this, I'm looking at it as an outsider, as an American, not as a Chinese person, not as a Japanese person, but as an American. And if you see the the Rape of Nanking, you see Japanese people going into the Chinese territory and doing all this stuff to the Chinese people. It's hard to see that, or to even hear about it. Just like as an American, it's hard to think about slavery and what happened to the blacks. It's hard to think about the Holocaust and what happened to the Jews. All that stuff is wrong. So the Chinese martial arts is like teaching the Jewish to protect themselves against the Nazis. The Chinese martial arts is like teaching the black slaves to protect themselves against the slave masters. The Chinese martial arts is for the Chinese to protect themselves against the Japanese. So you can't share these arts with the bullies. And that's how it's supposed to be. When you're teaching this stuff, you can't just teach anybody and everybody just because. Basically, you cannot be teaching the enemy in order to, so then they are more proficient in overtaking you and hurting you and abusing you. So, a woman that's being raped, she's not supposed to, you're not supposed to be training the rapist to get better at raping the woman. The martial arts, it's very important that the right people learn. And yes, there's not supposed to be discrimination based on race and gender, but there is supposed to be people that should learn and people that shouldn't learn. And really, I think knowing and learning more about these histories is very important to understand the martial arts and why it is the way that it is, and not, you know, where the abusers, the violent people, the bullies, the aggressors, um, they're not supposed to be the ones learning these techniques. And this, part of history is teaching us that why, you know, that this is not right. So I just wanted to make the video to bring awareness, because even at this age, at the age of 36, I've heard about it, I've read about it in the past, but I never really looked as deeply into it until maybe just now, because one of my students brought it to my attention and he was asking me questions about it. And even right now, there's a movie that I rented about it and I couldn't even watch it, and reading about it, I couldn't keep reading, because it's hard to even read it, and it's hard to think about it. It's almost like you want to act as if it never happened, but the truth is it did happen. And I think facing the truth can help understand why there is struggle between groups of people, why there's struggle between different countries. I didn't create this struggle between China and Japan. I am, this happened before I was born, and I'm an American looking in and seeing what's going on. Like, why can't they get along? But it's very understandable based on the history why there is that tension, and why there has to be a clear distinction between the Chinese martial arts and the Japanese martial arts, Chinese culture, Japanese culture. There has to be a clear distinction, because they're not the same, and that needs to be recognized. But I recommend for people that practice the Japanese martial arts to look into this. The people that practice the Chinese martial arts to look into this. Look at what's out there, the videos out there, the information is out there, and making an assessment. Which martial art do you want to represent, and which martial art do you want to be a part of?